Hi, welcome to Box on the Box Rock and Celluloid, or Bot Rock for short. So I've been thinking recently, what are sort of different things I could do for the channel, try and get people interested and talk about some of the things I love. And earlier in the year I did a thing about all the great albums released in 1980, heavy metal. It was called 1980, but there's part 1 and part 2. And then it occurred to me I'd actually kind of missed the sort of anniversary of those albums, in a way, the day they came out, as it were. And then it got me thinking, well, what about if I looked at classic albums and I did a sort of extended piece on them? And interestingly enough, now we're in November. There's not many albums in the type of genre we like tend to come out at this month, because you're going into Christmas and you just tend to get a lot of shitty compilations and the type of crap pop that you buy your mum or your grandma or your dad or whatever for Christmas. But one album popped up in my mind and I thought, let's do it, this is going to be the first one. So these anniversaries will be 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, as it were. It won't be kind of 38 years or something, so, or 27, so sometimes I'll have to wait till the next cycle comes around and I can grab an album, for instance, British Steel, I'm going to have to wait till 2025 and so on. So my first choice today is an album that's been a huge turning point in my life as a musician, as a guitar player, and that's Under Lock and Key by Dokken. And obviously I'm dropping this video today, there it is back at the front as usual, on the day it was released, which is November the 22nd, 1985. So in actual fact, this album didn't get released in the UK, I think, till about March or April 86. I remember when it came out, it got reviewed in Kerrang, it was only on import. My brother and I were desperate to get it. We had the Tooth and Nail album, we loved it, we'd just become huge fans, and I was already like a huge fan of George Lynch, the guitar player. So interestingly enough, the following year, earlier the next year, I think it would have been about January, maybe February 86, I went into my local record shop in Lancaster near where I lived, called Ear Records. I've probably regaled this tale before. I was flicking through the vinyl, I went past an album cover and it didn't register at first, and then I flicked back through the album and then obviously this appeared. Obviously it's got the logo in the corner, but I think what kind of sold me a misstep was the look, how the band looked on the front. They didn't look like Dokken did on the back of Tooth and Nail. Well, they're pretty street ready. So interestingly enough, these outfits they're wearing on the front, they never wore these on stage. These were actually designed by a guy called Ray Brown. And Ray Brown was the person who Judas Priest went to in the early days to get costumes, I believe. He's LA based. And eventually all the LA bands, hair bands, went to this Ray Brown guy. Interesting enough, George Lynch has got this kind of weird sash on here, and they're looking sort of a bit sort of regal, but he's also got lip gloss, and that's not George Lynch. But Queensryche fell into the same trap. They went to Ray Brown, they got costumed and fitted up for the Rage for Order album. They put a lot of people off, me included, when Queensryche appeared on the front cover of Kerrang with lip gloss in these stupid outfits and high hair. I was like, who are these twats? I'm not buying that record. But eventually I came round to it. So that's a little bit about the look. There's a picture of them on the back actually, and this picture was the front cover of their World Tour programme from this era. So I actually caught the band on this tour in 1986, April 14th, 1986. They were supporting Accept. Looking back now, it was a fantastic gig. George Lynch was stunning. I think Don Dokken wasn't a great front man, and that's probably why Dokken were one of those bands people say, oh, they should be bigger. They got into arenas, but I don't think they were a kind of band that were going to go up to the next level, which this album put them to a much higher level. So just a few stats. It went platinum, eventually it was gold on March the 4th, 1986, so 4 months after release. And then by the following April 1987, it had been declared platinum. It spent 67 weeks on the Billboard charts. Had a minor hit within My Dreams, Billboard chart number 77. And so on. So let's just talk about the album. It was recorded at Amigo Studios in North Hollywood. Then it says Total Access Recording, Redondo Beach, so I'm guessing it was mixed there. The band couldn't agree on a producer. Don Dokken wanted Michael Wagner. He'd worked with him on the Breaking the Chains album. He liked how he did vocals. but the other band are split into two camps. They thought that Wagner would favour Don, particularly George Lynch. So you got kind of paranoid. So I think the label suggested Neil Kernan. So this is produced by two people, Neil Kernan and Michael Wagner. I'm not sure who's responsible for what, but I'm guessing Neil Kernan took care of the kind of backing tracks, the guitar, bass, drums, and maybe Michael Wagner handled some of the vocals, but maybe he did some pickups on the guitar. It has got quite a Michael Wagner sound at the time. So Kernan and Wagner, two great producers of the 80s. Kernan did the Aviator album. He did Streets, I think. Rage for Order is probably one of his greatest productions. He also did the other Dokken album, Back for the Attack. Wagner did Balls to the Wall by Accept, which I think is one of his best sounding records. He did Extreme. Various other bands, Bonfire. A lot of good 80s stuff. Basically the sound of the album, it's got the Def Leppard influence. It's got the bishy snares, I call it. It's not got much crack to it. There's a lot of reverb, but it's what I say is good reverb. The sounds, because it's so well recorded, even though it has a lot of reverb on it, it's just reverbing good sounds. And the principal great sound on this is George Lynch's rhythm guitar sound. I think this is one of the best rhythm guitar sounds you'll find at the time outside of Van Halen. I'll just read back on the internet here. So this is what George Lynch said about how they got the guitar sound. We had two Marshall heads and two Laney heads. Not sure which models, but one of them was a Plexi, that'll be a Marshall. We had cabs in 3 different rooms. 2 cabs were placed in the big room at Amigo. So that would be the big live room. One connected to a Marshall and the other connected to the Laney. So to do that, you use something called a splitter. And that enables you to play one guitar through 2 amps. I've used this and it's a great technique. This is before we used plugins and digital technology. The Marshall was responsible for the high-end part of the sound, and the Laney was set to take care of the low end. If you think about that, Marshalls have got a brassy sound, quite a lot of treble, don't have much mid-range. Laney was obviously favoured by Tony Iommi, so you can understand that bottom-end sound that a Laney would have. There were 14 mics set up in that room in various positions around the cabinet and some further away to get the sound of the room. So this is quite a common technique. I would imagine they put 2 or 3 mics on different positions on the cabs, on the speaker cones. Engineers will know where these go. Maybe they had 2 mics on each cab for both amps, I'm guessing here. And then, you probably stick some mics at the back of the room, close to the ceiling, stuff like that, and it just reads the room and gets the different frequencies and interactions of the room, and then that can be blended at the desk on the faders. And the second Laney was sent to a very dead room and had a Boss chorus pedal in front of it, set to very slight chorus. So I'm imagining he would have used a CE2. Again, this is interesting. He's just using a classic old pedal, and the Boss chorus, you've heard it on stuff, particularly something like The Police, like Walking on the Moon. When you just set both those dials down, you'll just get a lovely, just a little bit of chorus there, and it's so subtle, and it can really just add a nice thickness and warmth to a rhythm guitar sound or a lead sound. And when chorus gets too much, it starts to oscillate the tone too much. But also, the Boss is a very subtle chorus. I've tried and heard of a chorus pedals, MXRs and that, and they change the sound too much. The great thing about the Boss pedal was it literally put chorus on your sound. It didn't kind of bring anything else to the party for me. So I'm guessing that's what he's done there. Quite common to use chorus in 80s guitar, rhythm guitar and lead. The second Marshall was sent to a small tiled bathroom to have a different room tone. So if you think about a tiled bathroom, it's going to have a hard surface. The sound, it's going to have, you're going to get a bit of, kind of slap back off the walls off that. But I would imagine that gave it quite a bit of bite. But again, engineers, people who do this would know more. Those 16 mics came in on the MCI 500 console mic press. Not sure what that means. It's probably the desk. There were buses to one bus, and that bus had a UREI 530 EQ on it. Best guitar EQ ever. Now, I'm not aware what this bit of kit is. Maybe some outboard gear. But it's typical to post EQ a guitar sound. Back in the 80s, a lot of people would use Boss multi-EQ pedal as well to boost sounds. People used treble boosts back in the day. That's how people got more gain, more bite. Brian May, Rory Gallagher, Tony Iommi. You know, people, you got to remember, amps are still quite low gain then, even though the technology was getting up there. People are always looking for ways to get extra. And the other thing about this is I suspect George Lynch was using a modded Marshall. Once Van Halen hit the scene, people wanted to get more from their standard amp, and people would start doing modifications. They would change the tubes. They might change speakers in the cabinets as well. I guess capacitors. Whatever gizmos are in amps. So I reckon he might have had a modded Marshall. So the weird thing about this, the final part of the guitar sound, he'd said to, I guess, Neil Kernan and Michael Wagner, he always got a great sound when he was playing with his Fostex, for his Fostex 4-track recorder at home. Obviously laying stuff down a cassette. For those of you who don't know, a Fostex recorder was like a 4-track you put in your blank cassette, and you could do home recordings. Now we all use a computer, or not if you're like me, because I'm a bit of a knacker that way. So what he's used is run at the end of the signal chain, and then what they've done is they've totally turned the gain up, the input, I guess, at the end of that signal, and that was right at the end. They hid it under the desk so no one could see it. He says the Fostex was set on stun, completely overdriven. And that was the final thing, was just cooking the signal. And I suspect that was something that gave George Lynch confidence. George Lynch is one of those players that he has to like the sound. If he's getting gremlins, if he's not happy with the sound that's coming out, even though the tone's in his fingers, he wouldn't get the playing performance. And then that was sent to a 3M 32-track digi machine. So 3M refers to, I guess, it's a Scotch tape. So this is the multi-track 32-track. Back then, there was a lot of 48-track recording and so on. If you used more tracks than in your 32, you'd have to do something called bouncing down. Now you can have infinite tracks. I could record 300 tracks digitally. Back then, you have to make decisions about where, how you're going to place your tracks and that, because if you run out, you've got to bounce down or find a gap in another track. So for instance, if I've got a solo on one track and I want some clean guitar, back then, so I did my solo but put my clean guitar on layer, but when it comes to the mix, when that clean guitar pops up, I'll have to change all the faders on the desk. That's the other thing, there's no automation then, although like they did have an SSL desks that have what's called automation. Possibly, I could be wrong, maybe they had an SSL desk at the of a recording studio, maybe they'll have to use some automation to do the fades and so on. Okay, so that's how Lynch got his guitar sound. Not sure about the drums and bass. I imagine the bass, they're probably using an amp and then a DI. It's often the case with bass. You mic you have the bass head, you mic the bass, the speaker. But you also set a DI and you control it at the desk, and that means you can bring in sort of brightness and another tone. You basically blend two tones. So it's got a really good sound. The room guitar sound, like it's punchy, it's got bottom end, it's got brightness, it's tight. On the next album, Back for the Attack, Lynch's tone was kind of a bit too trebly for me. On on Tooth and Nail, it's a little change. So on this, I think he really does nail his best guitar sound. His lead guitar tone for that, I believe, I'm not sure whether it was the same combination of setup, but I know that he used a Tube Screamer or Boss Overdrive just to cook the signal a bit for his leads. And I think that's one of the beauties of the sound on this record is Lynch, essentially, although it sounds complicated what I read back there, essentially he's plugging into a guitar head with a bit of overdrive, Tube Screamer, and he's going for it. So that's kind of like part of the sound, obviously, and then the look and the era it was dropped into. What's the tracks like? This is a Rock Candy remaster. So it opens with Unchained the Night. It's got a really dramatic opening, this, with clean guitar. There's another thing on this album, the clean guitar tone is really good. I suspect probably using a Rockman sometimes. Most studios had the Tom Scholz Rockman back then. You get great, bright, clean sounds out of that, but maybe sometimes it's tracked in with another clean sound or acoustic. So Unchained the Night, very dramatic intro, comes with a great riff, and I think with this, it's got a classic George Lynch riff, uses a tritone. For the guitarist, that's a flat 5. He'd already used this type of sound on the track When Heaven Comes Down. on the Tooth and Nail album. So it's kind of an evolution of that. Don's vocal comes in, great vocal. I mean, people knocked on Dokken, and that's because he didn't fit in with the typical archetype. You know, your Robert Plant type of singer, your Bon Scott type of singer, your Rob Halford type of singer. He's more like Klaus Meine. Obviously, he helped track the vocals demos for Blackout by the Scorpions. But he's got a melodic voice, and he writes great melodies, and that gave the band part of its unique sound. So on this track, you've got the first things become apparent is, you know, it's really tight. Jeff Peels and Mick Brown, a very straight ahead rhythm section, but they're really tight. They've got a good pocket. George, really tight. It sits in well. The tempo's good mid tempo. It's got a great chorus. And two fantastic solos by George Lynch. Instantly, when you heard this album, it was Lynch had gone up a notch. The sound was posh. It was better. His touch was better than Tooth and Nail. He'd evolved as a player. I think it's worth saying at this point, you know, this is an album that kind of solidifies him as a platinum act. I think Tooth and Nail have gone gold and would eventually go platinum. But at this point, they're quite a bit older. You know, George is 30, 31 when he makes this album. Don's 31, 32. Jeff is younger. He would be 26, 27. Mick about 30. But if you think by this point, this is their third album. Van Halen have already made 6 albums. Michael Schenker, who's the same age, has made, I don't know, about 10, 11 or something like that. Uli John Roth, another guitar comparison, maybe to George Lynch, had probably already made half a dozen albums, live album. So they come to success quite late, probably working out what they're going to do and learning about songwriting and waiting for the break. George Lynch had already auditioned for Ozzy, but it hadn't happened back in 81, I think 83 as well. So Unchained the Night's classic opener, classic Dokken track. Then it goes into The Hunter. This is the pick for me of the album. Got a fantastic rhythm part by George Lynch and uses a great couple of chords as part of the main riff. It's got my favourite Lynch solo. My only criticism of the solos in this album, listening now, they are swamped in reverb and delay. Particularly sort of reverb and a tight sort of slapback delay. And sometimes, you know, it'd be nice to hear a bit more articulation, but it's fantastic lead work. Something he does on this track is he puts in little licks to kind of build the song, and in the chorus it's got a little harmonised guitar line that adds an extra hook. The other thing he's using is tracked in clean guitars, and he'll do this throughout the album. He'll put in an extra clean part over a rhythm and things like that. And again, it's just adding in extra production elements in the sound. Great backing vocals. As a cool thing they do on the chorus, they do a whisper kind of as a kind of background thing on the chorus, which is quite a common technique to use whispering. And these are all things, it's layering in tracks that you couldn't reproduce live, but they're just building up the recording. But if you played the track live, it wouldn't, you wouldn't miss it. Next track's probably one of the biggest songs, In My Dreams. I think if you listen to the middle of the track, when after the solo, when it goes back into the riff on its own, you can hear how good the rhythm guitar sound is, how fat, how tight it is. Again, great backing vocals on this by Jeff Pilson. In that respect, Jeff, this is where the Van Halen influence is coming in, I guess. You've got the kind of straight ahead rhythm section. I mean, Alex Van Halen's quite a bit better than Mick Brown, I think, but Jeff Pilson's fulfilling the role of Michael Anthony with his great backing vocals. I mean, there's an argument he's as good or better singer than Don Dokken at some things in some ways. Apparently George Lynch didn't like this track. Him and Don fell out about it. But it's a really great track, classic Lynch solo, really good. Track 4 is kind of filler track, Slipping Away. I do like this track. It's a ballad. They've obviously been told by the record company, look, you've got to do a ballad. It's quite a nice song, well arranged, lovely lead break. Quite interesting guitar, clean guitar here seems to have 2 tracks, I think. So you've got a clean guitar part and then a slightly semi-distorted behind it. And then it's tracked in some acoustic as well. So again, George using different timbres to build the track with the producer. Good harmonies, good vocals. And side 1 finished with like one of the classic up-tempo rockers, Lightning Strikes Again. This is a classic F-sharp key riff. Guitarists know the key of F-sharp's a key sort of key. For metal and hard rock riffs, it gives you kind of shapes you can use, and George Lynch exploits this. Something he does on this track, and he does it on In My Dreams as well, is he tracks an extra rhythm on certain key points and it just provides punch, and he does that throughout the album. This track's got an amazing solo where he basically battles himself, so he'll solo in one side of the stereo spectrum and then respond, and they overlap. The first time I ever heard this track, I bought the vinyl, I got it home. Actually, I was paid $7.99 to buy the German import. Totally random. I'll just quickly say that you can't see this, but on the original artwork here, it's got black embossing behind that. Okay, so you've got underlock and key in red writing, and then it's black shadow behind it. But on my German import, it just had red writing. How nerdy. So yes, this call and response solo. So the first time I heard it, it just blew me away so much. I actually picked the needle up and listened to it again when I was first listening to the album. And that ends side one. Side two, it's not love. So on this, George Lynch plucks the two strings, kind of chicken picking I call it. And again, he uses a tritone. He uses his flat 5, which is one of his trademarks. This is kind of like that AC/DC type of song. So you can hear the influence of AC/DC, Scorpions and Van Halen principally. Maybe a little bit of Ozzy. That's, I'd say this band, Dokken were original. You could hear the sort of influences, Judas Priest as well. But the combination of Lynch, Dokken's melody to his voice, Pilson's backing vocals did give them their sound, So this is a great track. This, it's really good. Again, the Van Halen influence is a little bit in the middle where it does a kind of talk down bit where Don takes a phone call. And it's a common trope of 80s hair bands. Not that they should be called a hair band really, but, copying Van Halen, the classic Unchained breakdown where Dodie Roth talks to Ted Templeman. They do it on this. I think Rat do it on Invasion of Your Privacy. This laid down as well. So that's that's another thing in that track. Great little outro solo as well. On the fade out. Great thing with these albums. You get these fade out solos, and sometimes you just lift the fader, you'll catch like a little lick or something. Then Jaded Heart, again one of the filler tracks, but a nice track, a ballad, lovely track, sort of electroacoustic and clean on this. And then Don't Lie to Me, which is a really nice kind of Scorpions type of riff, lovely harmony guitar. Really like this track, always did. Great backing vocal on this by Jeff Pilson, you can hear him in the refrain, in the chorus. Again, sort of creating a multiple hook. Very catchy, very well structured, these songs, I think the only track that's over 5 minutes is Unchained and that's probably because it's got the intro and the sort of long outro solo, but it's not that long. Other than that, they're all of the 3.5 to 4.5 minute length. I think the whole album was about 42 minutes, so very well arranged. And then track 9's the deep cut. This is I was just listening to the album before I did this to get all the stuff fresh in mind. I think Will the Sunrise. It's in a key of D minor. A lot of Lynch is riffing in it. He's using the kind of shapes that have become beloved of other guitarists, myself included. Fantastic solo. Really cool lyric by Don, and again, great harmonies. After the solos, a great kind of pre-chorus bridge arrangement they do that's slightly different to the other bridges, which works really well. Again, George is putting in extra sort of little bits of lead, again, just to kind of build stuff, and it's a really well produced track. It's a well crafted track. It's the kind of tracks you get on albums that I love, where you listen through the whole album, a little gem comes up, and they probably never played it live. And then the album finishes with an up-tempo rocker till the living end. I like this track. I probably don't like it as much as I do now. Again, George using the old tritone, but it's, I would say on this album there's 3 kind of 6 out of 10 tracks, and the rest of them you would give the full Monty. It's probably tipping a 9 out of 10. Interestingly enough, Till the Living End, at the end, on the original vinyl, it had the sound of the guitar lead kind of making the sound on the floor. When I just listened back to this, I realised that's been cut off in this master, which is kind of a bit annoying, because I sold my vinyl, so I can't listen to that anymore. I'll find it on YouTube. It says here, produced, recorded and mixed by Neil Kern and Michael Wagner, so how that was split up, I'm not sure. So yeah, I think in summarising, I'm just looking for any kind of extra notes, and I think I've covered all the things I was going to say there. I mean, is this a classic album? I think if you like 80s LA metal, it is a classic. It's one of the best, along with Out of the Cellar by Rat, along with Invasion of Privacy, Tooth and Nail, Back for the Attack. There will be other albums. You know, for me, Motley Crue never made a classic album, but some people disagree with that. But Dokken got up the food chain. They never got as big as Rat or Crue, but they're in the next sort of division. But I think for people, you know, like me, and probably other people liked it, it was just a combination of melody, muscle, Don's vocals being more melodic, George Lynch, you know, his style of guitar playing, and the simple sort of rhythm section with great backing vocals really just created really, really great songs. I mean, George Lynch, you know, was a big sell with this. If you play guitar, I think this is one of the most complete guitar performances ever committed to, you know, recorded. You know, it's something I'll probably talk about in the future, but, you know, you've got Malmsteen, Eatman, Smile, you know, Diary of a Madman, various Van Halen albums. You know, there's those classic albums of history where the guitarist just pulls together loads of great solos, loads of great riffs, and I think this is the album where George was most complete. He would do, you know, better things and other things sometimes on Back for the Attack and his Lynch Mob records, but there's a consistency here, there's a real great structure to the solos. Don Dokken's vocals, really good. The whole band performs, but I would understand if other people found it a bit plodding. It's just a record I always loved. And although not an out-and-out classic like, you know, Paranoid by Black Sabbath or Back in Black or whatever, if you love this kind of music, it's an essential record. Well played, well produced, and capturing its era, but not dating too much. So thanks for watching, and this was, like I said, this is the first one of these I'll be doing as various dates next year appear. I've got a list of other albums that I'll talk about, and I'm excited about that. So cheers, thanks very much.